years after Eric Garner died at the hands of the NYPD, the Justice Department passes on prosecuting the cop who killed him. Well, tonight, Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, speaks with our own Dominic. In drama on the floor of the House, that is, Congress votes to condemn President Trump's attacks on 4 progressive Democrats. The question is, will the real drama be at the ballot box? And if so, does this mess and the allegations of racism against our own president actually help Trump? And Jeffrey Epstein awaits word on whether or not he'll get bail tomorrow as he awaits trial on a slew of sex and prostitution crimes, all involving underage girls. Our question tonight to the panel: why is the judge even considering letting this guy, a predator, back out on the streets? We'll, of course, also remember the life of the late Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens. He passed away yesterday. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. It was exactly 5 years ago today, July 17th, 2014, on Staten Island in New York City. Police, they approached Eric Garner, who was illegally selling loose cigarettes. One officer applied what clearly looks like a chokehold, and Garner, he soon died. Well, yesterday, the Justice Department announced that it would not prosecute the officer who killed Garner. For family, friends, and followers of the Garner case, it's like they've been victimized again, and that group includes, most notably, Garner's mother, Gwen Carr. Now, just after that announcement, she spoke with our own Dominic. Dominic?
Well, good evening to you, Richard. It has been a very busy 24 hours. And the family of Eric Garner says this is not over. And all this as the family marks 5 years since Garner was killed, all for allegedly selling illegal cigarettes on Staten Island.
The evidence here does not support charging police officer Daniel Pantaleo or any other officer.
You knew the decision before the eve of his anniversary, but you waited for the eve of the anniversary to bring this to us. Why wait till now? It's just like a slap in the face. 5 years ago, you choked my son to death. Today, you choked us.
The final words of Gwen Carr's son, Eric Garner, were caught on video, sparking national protest. The Staten Island grand jury did not indict, and the feds are taking a pass on the case as well. Officer Daniel Pantaleo will not face a federal civil rights violation charge.
We have to stop this nonsense about trying to be technical about this. Daniel Pantaleo killed my son. The other officers stood by while he did it, and they lied on official reports. Charged him after he was dead. All kinds of misconduct went on that day. And now 5 years later, they said they're not going forward with charges. They didn't see any misconduct. They didn't see anything that would make them indict the officer. I mean, this is an outrage.
The only recourse for the Garner family that is left now falls in the lap of New York City Police Commissioner James O'Neill, who, after a departmental trial of Pantaleo this summer, can fire him or take no action at all.
We're angry, and this officer gets to go home to his family every night. He gets paid raises every year and goes on with his life as usual. We have to relive every day of what happened to Eric. And it's not just a news story to us, it's our life. And it will be our life forever. So I hope that Commissioner O'Neill makes a just decision.
Carr says the feds, quote, strung her along. In her Staten Island apartment, she showed us what she calls Eric's Corner, mementos from his life. While we were there, a national newscast came on the air with one of the lead stories about the Garner case. The moment the video was shown, Carr looked down and did not raise her head until the story concluded.
No, I can't look at that video anymore. I've never looked at the video in its entirety. So every time it comes on, it's like them killing my son over and over again.
Attorney General Barr himself reportedly made the direct decision for the feds to pass on the case, to which Carr responds,
well, as we've been watching Barr, We know he is not for people of color. He's not for immigrants. He's not for any of us. He's part of the Trump administration, and they do not like us. So I didn't expect anything different from him.
This decision says that the federal civil rights are not protected no matter what the evidence may be.
Carr says her fight continues. That's the only way she can obtain closure.
All right, I want to bring in our panel here. Let's get into this Garner case and decision not to prosecute along with Dominic. We're joined tonight by Doug Van Oiste. He's a founding partner of Carson Van Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct and also selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. He's also a former prosecutor in New York as well. Mayo Bartlett, he's an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Thank you all for joining us. And Dom, you put a human face on it from the family's perspective. Were they surprised by what they learned this week? Did they expect that it was going to go down this way, but they wish they were treated with more respect?
I think they were hoping against hope that the feds would take on this case. But I think they knew the political reality quite some time ago with the change of administrations from Obama to Trump. I think their hope diminished that the feds would take on this case. And at the end of the day, the prosecutors say they just don't have the evidence to go forward.
I want to come back because there's a lot of questions about both at the state level what was and wasn't done in the interim, and then also in terms of transparency, what people should or should know about cops and what will happen to Pantaleo. But first, I think there's this impression, Mayo, that a Department of Justice is a apolitical arm. It's one of the three branches of government that doesn't have politics involved, and whether it's a Democrat or Republican administration, they're going to look at the facts of the case and they're going to decide it accordingly. When in fact, a DOJ from one administration, the Obama administration, and a DOJ from, let's say, a Trump administration can look at the exact same factors and come to a very different conclusion if they want to pursue charges or not. That's just the reality of it.
Absolutely. Although I have to say that during the Obama administration, these cases were not indicted either. And it was very difficult to find any of the cases that led to indictments.
And if I can, I'll give a frame of reference. Mayo is one of the most versed attorneys there is in terms of hate crimes, and when it escalates, not just from a state level, but or even a county level or a state level, but when it goes to the feds, really the reticence they have in terms of attaching that to it, unless it's, patent.
Sure, and to listen to them talk about how they didn't think that there was enough evidence. They're bringing cases as we speak against people who have less evidence against them that are civilians and will go all the way to trial. And if they lose that trial, we'll never hear about it. So certainly if they felt that there was a close call on this case, and to me, watching Mr. Garner be choked, clearly there was an intent to put the arm around his neck. Clearly there was an attempt to put him down. While his head was on the ground, there was an attempt for someone to put a knee on his face and put their full body weight on him. So as far as I'm concerned, let a jury make that determination. It's certainly at a minimum, I think it's a fairly strong case actually for the feds, but at a minimum it's a case that a jury should be able to hear.
To be fair to the current DOJ, New York State had a chance to do something about it. A state grand jury declined to indict. Forget about, convict. They declined to even issue an indictment on this.
Well, you have to look at where that grand jury was impaneled. Number one, it's in Staten Island. Staten Island's one of the least diverse boroughs and heavily populated by police and their families. So that's something you have to look at. The other thing is we never know what information is submitted to the grand jury or how it's submitted to the grand jury.
Well, let me stay on that transparency issue, Doug, because there's been a debate. And I will tell you, elected officials I respect on both sides of the aisle don't always fall into neat categories on this. And the subject is, what form of transparency should we attach to a police officer in terms of his or her background when there's a high-profile case? In fact, I think we have one lawmaker, legislator Bailey here, speaking about why he thinks there should be more, not only in this case, but going forward.
Greater transparency leads to greater accountability, and I truly respect our men and women in blue. They run towards danger when we run away from it. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we know who is serving us and that they are held accountable to the public that they serve.
So, Doug, that state senator is pushing a bill. I do know other people, even fellow Democrats, who disagree. What's your thought in terms of, let's say in Pantaleo's jacket, that he had prior cases of excessive use of force, or that he had used, this is all hypothetical, but that he had used derogatory language towards an ethnicity or a race or whatever. Should that be part of the public discourse? When we have this, should that be out there in terms of the full totality, or should we look at the singular incident for which he or she as an officer is being accused of inappropriate behavior?
Well, I think in a case like this, they've decided that there's not going to be a criminal prosecution, but there is going to be a civil prosecution, I'm sure. And in a case like this, there's going to be discovery, civil discovery, and they're going to ask for that information, and that information may come out. Of course, you want to know the full context of everything. You don't want somebody to make an unfounded accusation and then that have to be bandied around for the rest of somebody's life. But if something needs context, if somebody does something over and over again, that has to come out, because the fact finder needs to understand that information to make the right decision.
And Richard, if it was any of us, believe me, it comes out. You will learn about your prior bad acts, anything that you've done, prior convictions, and a jury will hear that, and it does chip away at your presumption of innocence. So either you do it for the police and for everybody else, or not at all.
I only got a minute left, Dom, and the subject is Officer Pantaleo here, okay? Because he's been on desk duty since this went down. We've learned that Internal Affairs, the investigator, had recommended disciplinary charges against him, but only until last year was that pushed forward. What happens to him? Does he lose his job? I mean, people should remember, if de Blasio wanted to, he could do this. And Pantaleo, forget about desk duty, he wouldn't be employed. What happens within the NYPD to decide whether or not he's still a man in blue?
There was a departmental trial this summer in which horrible autopsy photos were shown of Mr. Garner. The medical examiner testified, in essence, that it was a chokehold, but the Stuart London...
Which is against departmental regulations.
Thank you, but Stuart London, his attorney, says no, it was his bad health issues. Officer Pantaleo was short on time. At the end of the day, can be found not guilty of anything, or Commissioner O'Neill can say he's not fit for duty and can fire him outright.
And we will, of course, continue to follow that. All right, now, after a break, the House voted last night to condemn President Trump's tweets and comments attacking 4 Democratic members. So, in that sense, Democrats, they may have won the battle, but will that actually help Trump win the war at the ballot box come 2020? We're going to get into that with ABC News political director Rick Klein next.